I'm Dave Byers. I'm the Response Section Manager with the Washington State Department of Ecology. And this presentation is on the political climate in Washington State. And it's really designed for folks who are either new to the world of oil spill response or are currently active in oil spill response in other parts of the country. Washington State is a unique environment. We treasure our natural environment. And I think you'll see that we have some unique challenges during oil spills with regard to the politics of the state. And if you've seen my presentation before, I'll apologize in advance for recycling the same two jokes, but here they go. So when I'm often asked to describe the political climate in Washington State, I point to a map of the United States and I ask, what coast is Washington State on? And of course, the answer is left. And that really does a good job of summing up the political climate in Washington. We're a very progressive state. You might even say liberal, and that shows up in a lot of the areas in our oil spills that concern citizens, our concern for the natural environment, and also the concern for the economic impacts of oil spills. They get a lot of attention in Washington State. Then I'm also asked oftentimes, how liberal is Washington State? Well, if you're from Washington or Seattle, you'll recognize this icon and you can probably name that that's the Space Needle. However, Washington State residents can also tell you the date this photo was taken. And that would be the date that marijuana was legalized in Washington. Washington State was an early adopter of legalizing recreational marijuana. I think we tied with Colorado, passing it during the same legislative sessions at the same year. That's how liberal Washington is.
So the Clean Air Authority really had their work cut out for them.
That's right. The emphasis that our state legislature placed on oil spill issues shows up repeatedly in state law. We are often in front of the legislature, the spills program of the Department of Ecology. We have legislative activity year after year after year, even years when there's no agency request legislation. So we're not introducing legislation. However, stakeholders in the state are often introducing legislation to or legislative ideas for consideration. In state law, we see that there's an emphasis on the importance and risk of waterborne transportation and the billions of gallons of oil that come into Washington State every year for refining. State law recognizes, excuse me, that Washington has some of the most unique and special maritime environments in the United States. It recognizes the economic importance of those resources. We have recreation, tourism, shellfish industry, fishing industry, all of that adds up to thousands and thousands of jobs in Washington State. Our economic livelihood depends on clean water that are free from spills. State law also recognizes the obligation that the state has to ensure that these resources are protected. Some other areas that show up in legislation, our legislature identifies the importance of prevention to protect these marine environments. Prevention is more cost-effective and protective compared to responding and cleaning up after spills. And this is a tough one. This is the challenge that was presented to the Department of Ecology spills program. Our legislature established a zero spills goal for the spills program and the Department of Ecology to reach. And that's very empowering. It's a very high bar. And it very clearly sets expectations on our program. Unfortunately, we have not yet met that zero spills goal, but we are working on getting there. Other areas that show up, some of the uniqueness of our maritime environment in Washington State and our aquatic systems. The importance of salmon to the state for our industry and for tribes in Washington State. It's part of our cultural heritage. It shows up on our state quarter. Just as a hint, if you see a symbol on the state quarter, it's probably pretty important to the state. The orcas, the unique population of orcas in Puget Sound. Unfortunately, these are not only iconic species for Washington State, but they're also endangered species. They're on the federal endangered species list. And part of our spills world, we're concerned about the impacts to both these species and future populations of these organisms surviving if there's a big spill in Washington state. Our citizenry is very active in Washington state. We invented a term in Washington state that you may have heard of, and that's kayaktivist. These are some kayaktivists out protesting one of the drill rigs that came into Puget Sound for maintenance operations. We also have some other groups that are concerned about issues such as oil trains. This group of nice young ladies in this photo, they're an activist group called the Raging Grannies. And in the upper left-hand corner, the Raging Grannies showed up one day at the Department of Ecology when we were doing some rule writing around oil trains as directed by the state legislature. And they camped out, chained themselves to their rocking chairs, and literally shut down the entrance to the agency for a day. We hosted them very nicely. We made sure they were warm and comfortable, offered them tea and coffee, and at the end of the day, they very politely left. Our Governor, Jay Inslee, front and center among his initiatives is a clean environment. And he has several initiatives that he has directed the Department of Ecology and other natural resource agencies to pursue to support his objectives. Our legislature, year after year, this dates back to the creation of geographic response plans, which were a Washington state invention. They've spread, as you maybe under different names, geographic response strategies in some places, but those really started here because our legislature was looking for areas to make advanced planning and prevention and really improve spill responses and invest in those initiatives. Other areas where Washington state has led the nation, things like our unique contingency plan standards we have in Washington state, our pre-booming requirements when oil transfers are being done over the water. Washington state has a unique natural resource damage assessment law. They have directed us to do maritime risk assessments, address sinking oil, and have passed legislation that's unique for crude by rail, and including requiring rail companies that transport crude oil to develop their own contingency plans for oil spills. All of this is really just demonstrates the importance placed by our legislature on being very proactive at spill prevention, preparedness, and response. It's not an understatement to say spills are a great big deal in Washington state. Oftentimes we have spills which of comparable volumes in other state wouldn't even make the news. In Washington state, even small spills like this 300-gallon spill off the Alki Point in Seattle, it was a lead story in our news cycle for multiple news cycles. It was a great big deal, and it was 300 gallons. I don't want to suggest, I would never do this in Washington state, that 300 gallons isn't a large spill. However, in most states, I think we would recognize that that would not make the lead story in multiple news cycles.
In some states, and I won't name any, 300 gallons in the water would be called Tuesday.
Yeah, right. We have a whole host of stakeholders who are very interested in our work and concerned that really at Ecology, we're holding our partners, our industry partners, accountable for spills when they happen. We've got, agency executives that we report to when spills happen, multiple agencies. We frequently report even our small spills to the governor's office, to legislatures in the areas impacted. We're reporting to our tribal partners when small spills happens. We've got a number of keeper agencies. For example, the Columbia River Keeper, Puget Sound Keepers, and a number of others. Our agency partners, the list goes on and on and on for the folks who really help us with our work and keep our work front and center as our important mission. Part of our concern is that Washington state is a very heavily trade dependent state, arguably the most trade dependent state by revenue of all the states in the United States. 1 in 3 jobs is directly linked to trade. At least as of 2015, it was a $76 billion a year industry. 1/6 of the total state economy is based upon external trade. And if that economic machine is interrupted because we have a major spill in Puget Sound, that's going to have a great big impact on our economy in Washington. So how big of an impact might that be? Well, this is 2006 numbers. As part of rulemaking, Ecology did an economic analysis. We didn't do it ourselves. We contracted for that work. And that study demonstrated that a major spill in Puget Sound would impact $10.8 billion in economic activity and would result in the loss of 165,000 jobs. So as you can imagine, those are in 2006 numbers. We're in 2021. Those numbers are going to be significantly higher in today's dollars. So spills are a big deal. What does success look like? Well, you know, we have excellent industry partners who have invested in equipment, skimmers, the nonprofits that support spill response, our response contractors, our other agency partners. You know, I feel really good in Washington State that we're ready for a spill if one happens. I think we will have an excellent and safe technical operational spill response. Where I think we're going to be vulnerable is getting our message out and establishing ourselves as the most timely and trusted source of accurate information. And to do that, we're going to need help from all of our partners. We're going to need help from tribes. We're going to need help from our industry, our response contractors, our nonprofits, our agencies. All of this has to come together very, rapidly, aggressively, and in a well-coordinated manner to really get our message out there first and recruit all of these partners to be, our virtual liaison officers, if you will, sharing our messages. So our job in the spill response, when it happens, is really getting out there first before anybody else gets their message out. That's tough to do in a social media world that we live in, but it's going to be critical to our success. I think we could have the best technical response operationally, recover 100% of the oil. However, if we fail on these two fronts, in public information or liaison, if we fail to get our message out there and recruit these people as our partners, I think, in the court of public opinion, the response, no matter how good it goes operationally, will be seen as a failure. So this is really where we are challenged as a response community in Washington. However, if we achieve that, this is what we get when we're done. We get a clean, healthy environment. We get the perception that our response partners in industry, tribes, the support agencies, our response contractors are the best in the United States and the best in the world. And I think we're there. I think we have a very unique, special community here that is genuinely concerned, and we just have to sell that story.